Hello, everybody. It's me, Tammy Devine. Good morning. This is CCN Sunrise, and I don't know if this should be a CCN Sunrise or a Tammy's Take because it's going to be a great conversation with me and James Farr. He is the host of The Conversation Live on Facebook. And I'm so glad to have you with me today, James.
Thank you, Tammy.
We're going to talk, you and I, we could talk all day about like 100 different topics and have a blast doing it, debating sometimes, you know, knocking heads sometimes, but that's okay. Today we're going to talk about something very serious going on. I want to talk overall about police brutality throughout the country that we hear so much about, but I also want to talk a little bit locally also about some of the things you've been talking about with the latest issue of police brutality going on in Pasadena in the San Gabriel Valley here. So let's start with the overall question, I think, of is police brutality in the Black community as prevalent as we see in the news?
It's beyond more than prevalent, Tammy. It's been something that has been systemic since, the last 400 years. But in this contemporary, I think what's happening is we're seeing more cell phone videos, more independent videos. And so America has an opportunity to see it through the lens directly of the people who are most affected.
Do you think that makes a difference, that it is because of social media, it's because everybody has a camera on their cell phones, that everyone thinks it's so huge and massive of a problem?
It does make a difference. However, you still commonly see people who want to assume or give a benefit of the doubt to the officers involved and really kind of take on this approach toward the victims as what else did they do? And in many cases, what you see is what you get. It's just flat out brutality.
It might be, but why is that not a legitimate question?
I mean, it's a fair question, but right now what we are seeing time and time and time again is more akin to lynching someone at the town square. That's what these cell phone videos represent.
I'm not going to argue that there are some videos out there that look very, very bad, and that there are some unjustified shootings of Black men that we have seen over the past few years, which has given rise to like Black Lives Matter and other organizations. But more often than not, in the majority of the cases that we see out there, James, the police officers, it eventually comes out as a justified shooting. And often we see that maybe the person might have been armed, or they might have rushed the police, or they might have, raised up something that looked like a gun, something like that. In the majority of the cases of these that we've seen over the years, it's been like that, James.
Well, when we say majority and might, that kind of doesn't really go hand in
I didn't
hand.
say might. I'm saying the majority of the cases. No. I'm not saying might. I'm not qualifying that in any way, shape, or form. The majority of the cases, it has come out that the shootings were justified in a court of law. That's why I can say that without a qualifier.
Specifically here in Los Angeles County, there have probably been, an estimated nearly 300 officer-involved deaths involving citizens or residents. And the district attorney, Jackie Lacey, has declined to prosecute officers.
Who is a Black woman.
Who is a district attorney.
And a Black woman.
By coincidence, but she's also a district attorney who has declined to prosecute any officers in any of these cases. And
Can we really look at it and say that it's racism or anything like that?
I never said it was racism.
You're not. I want to be clear about that because this is what a lot of people say.
I didn't say that, but what I'm saying is it certainly doesn't lend to the narrative of fair and equality when we don't see any officer, whether the victim is African American, Latino, Asian. Well, we don't typically see too many whites killed by the police, but specifically,
how do you know that?
Specifically in
there
the
are
case,
white people killed by police all the time. How can you say that? We just don't know their names because the media does not make a big deal out of white people who die on camera.
Well, because we just don't see it in quite mass numbers as we see
it's
with
not
African
true.
Americans.
They are the majority, and those are the majority of the police shootings, James.
But I want to look at what District Attorney Jackie Lacey is not doing, and then we could also look at in this recent incident in Sacramento with Stephon Clark, where the district attorney in office there a week after the officers gunned him down, accepted a $13,000 donation from the police union in Sacramento. So if that doesn't smell like a conflict, if that doesn't smell like the fix is in, I don't know what is, Tammy.
I'm not going to say that I know all of the details of that particular shooting, and I'm not going to say that, you know, all of the situations that happen with police and the shootings are on the up and up. You know, I think that we will always know that there will always be some either poorly trained officers or trigger happy officers, or, you know, police officers who maybe are racist or prejudiced. There's always, no matter what group of people that you have, there will always be somebody that's bad, and there'll always be people who are good.
Well,
let
me be clear. This isn't an NWA moment in terms of how we may feel about the police. The men and women in law enforcement have a tough job. I agree. I understand. And it's something that none of us, you or I, will ever be placed in a position.
We don't have to run towards gunfire.
We don't have to run towards it. But that being said, there still is a certain level of accountability. There's certainly a level of humanization that my brothers and sisters in the community are not afforded, and police tend to go more heavily handed when it comes to contact with African Americans and Latino.
Now I know that in Los Angeles, you know, as this liberal bastion, you know, the sanctuary city here, and California being sanctuary state, you know, that especially in Los Angeles, there's a police commission set aside, and their job is to really bridge the gap between the community and the police union and police officers and everything police related. And they have tried to implement, you know, community policing, to be out there in the community. They went to I don't know, a couple of different states to see how they were operating, or cities around the country to see how they were operating with community policing and getting along better with the community and all that. All of that was supposed to be implemented, I think, starting this year, actually, I think. And so I'm just wondering if any of that puts your mind at ease a little bit, or if we're seeing any kind of difference because of some of the things that they were supposed to be implemented.
Absolutely not. The process of...
No?
Absolutely not. The process of how police commissions are assembled inherently leads to corruption. It inherently leads to a conflict of interest. What you have to unpack in those scenarios is who appoints these people.
Who does appoint them? Why don't you tell our audience?
They're council members. In most municipalities, the council member appoints that person to this. So police commissions tend to be more favorable towards the police departments, the police officers, and the police unions. So it's not an inherent thing that they're going to provide discipline and structure.
So you don't trust any of these institutions?
If you knew what I knew, Tammy, you wouldn't either.
I know a lot. I don't know if I know everything you know. I'm still working on that. But then I have to just ask the question, what would make Black Lives Matter happy? What would make you happy? What's your solution and your fix?
Well, I can't speak for Black Lives Matter, but I can speak for myself. You know, when we look at the systemic issues, you know, and what we see how African Americans are treated by the police and the heavy-handedness of the police, I think Baltimore got it right. And what they've decided to
James,
do, their city has...
just tell me Baltimore has got something right?
Their city has decided that if officers are found to be in violation of conduct, or they have committed criminal acts, they are personally holding these officers financially liable, thus reducing the burden on the taxpayers and citizens. What we see far too often is something happens, an officer gets a paid vacation at the expense of you and I. And that's not a part of the issue.
And you also know what else will happen, James?
They won't be convicted. They won't face prosecution. That's pretty obvious.
You hold cops personally liable for things that happen while they are in the line of duty like this. And Baltimore will have fewer police officers. They will be undermanned,
You know,
and people will start complaining again and saying that, oh, they don't care about us, because people won't want to work there.
Tammy,
how can you tell me Baltimore got that right?
Here's a fact. The police union survives administrations of office. They survive police chiefs that come into office. The police union and the police officers will be there. Now, just because if they decide or choose to do something criminal, that we're going to now all of a sudden say we're not going to hold them accountable and they're going to suppress their enforcement? Absolutely not. If that's the idea, if that's the mentality, we don't need them protecting us in the first place. They have a duty to rise beyond reproach in how they deal with the citizens.
I just want to make sure that we all heard it straight, that what you said as your solution and your fix to the situation.
It's a suggestion. I don't know if it's a fix.
Is to make sure that anybody who's working for a police department, if something happens and goes wrong and could be justified or accidental, that they are going to have to pay for any damages out of their own pocket.
Absolutely. We have to make officers more accountable.
Accountability, yes.
Right now, we foot the bill in the J.R. Thomas case, in the Kendrick McDade case, in the pending case here locally with Christopher Balu. It's you and I, the taxpayers, that have to pay this.
Let's talk a little bit about the Christopher Balu case, because that's one. You know, most of these cases I read and I read and I read and I look at various news sources about what's going on, and we don't always hear the entire story from the media, because frankly, most of the media is always on the side of the liberal Black Lives Matter narrative. Most of the time
there is some balance, and I'm sure your audience would agree with that.
Most of the time they are on that side. And I read a lot of different sources, and what I find most of the time is something's going on where the guy either holds up a weapon or charges the police or something like that.
That's not this case. That's not this case.
Right.
So let's not color that.
That's the point I'm trying to make, James, is that in this situation, I've looked at the video, and you've done a lot of reporting on this and put out a lot of video on this, and the things that I have seen that you have put out, it looks like the cops really had no business being in Altadena, first of all, because they're Pasadena police, and they shouldn't have put their hands on the guy to start with. You know, looking at the video, it just looks like the cops did not necessarily do the right thing. And I'm usually defending the cops, but in this situation, when you see those videos, it looks like they got way ahead of themselves, and whatever discipline they may have coming could be deserved. I don't know yet, because it hasn't all played out in court and all of that. But in this case, it looks pretty bad with Christopher Balu.
It certainly doesn't look good, you know, and bad is kind of subjective, because you know, what's even worse is that this young man has to live with the rest of his life knowing that the same two officers who may have intended, and once Officer Esparza pulled his service weapon and decided to place his hand on the trigger, in his mind he was going to kill Christopher Balu. And so Mr. Balu has to live the rest of his life knowing that the same two officers who were going to take his life also saved his life. And that's just a horrible thing to have to live with, all because of tinted windows and no front license plate. And then this narrative that has been floated around that, you know, he looked suspicious because he didn't pull into the driveway of the gas station on the right side. Who's to say what is normal behavior?
What I saw in the video was that I think the cops were wanting to pull him over. And I don't know if he saw them or not, but he pulled into the gas station, he parked, and he looked like he was just walking on his merry way to go inside to get gas. You know, I don't know what his intent was there, if he was trying to play it off that he was being chased, or if he really didn't see it and was just going to get gas. I don't know his intention. But what I did see...
Either way, Chris had no contraband, he had no drugs, he had no weapons, he was not wanted, he was not on parole, he had never been arrested before. He was not a criminal or a gang member. He was your son, my son, and many of our in the audience's son, a 21-year-old who simply was driving down the street and was accosted by police officers who, in effect, were on a pretextual stop. They were out of policy on their extraterritorial arrest, where they actually pursued him into Altadena and made a U-turn and came back, and then immediately escalated to force. What did Chris do wrong in this whole scenario?
I want to wrap this up, but I want to just touch briefly on the fact that there's been quite a lot of fallout from this case alone. The police chief is now gone, and is basically because of this, Philip Sanchez. He's been around for a number of years.
8 years, yes.
8 years, yeah. So why don't you tell us what's going on with that, with all of that, with the fallout in light of this case?
Well, since I had former Chief Sanchez on the Conversation Live February 26th, and since then, 2 days later, Officer Vaskin Gordikian, who was his adjunct, was indicted on gun running charges.
Gun running? What in the world?
Yeah, and so that was a pretty interesting thing. And then 2 days later, Chief Sanchez abruptly resigned. Some have floated around, former Mayor Bill Perperian has floated around that he was forced out. Others just have suggested that he just decided it was time to get out, where it is.
What's your take?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think while it may be a good step, I never was one that was advocating for the chief to be removed. I thought if there were going to be some reform, that he had the best chance of doing it from within. But now we're set with former deputy chief, now interim chief, John Perez.
I know him as Commander Perez.
Yeah, so
known him for a long time, done interviews with him. Seems like a pretty solid guy. Has a long history in Pasadena.
We'll see.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for talking with me, having a conversation with me.
Yes.
In my neck of the woods, with me, doing the grilling this time, James. I appreciate it.
Thank
I
you,
always
Tammy.
enjoy talking with you, and I hope we get a chance to sit on set again or do the conversation live again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, that's it for now. You guys heard it all here about police brutality. Would love your opinions and voice on this once it's posted online. All right. Thanks, you guys. Talk to you soon.